Hello, I am Bosskitty LOL, and this is a new summoner's guide to watching League of Legends Esports. So, this is a comprehensive guide intended for new fans on how to find, watch, and enjoy League of Legends Esports. So, like I said, it's meant for new fans, but I think that everyone can find something helpful in this video. Whether you are, a fan of just a couple years, you're watching the LCS for the first time this year, you've been a fan since the first Worlds way back when, you can probably find something that you enjoy, find helpful, find interesting in this video, even if it's just, what's the current world meta, what champions are you likely to see, there'll be something for you in this guide. So, please let me know if there's anything that I leave out. Obviously, at the end, if you still have any questions, feel free to ask them below. I want to build a community where we can kind of ask anything. For new fans especially, ask your questions below. No judgment from me. I'll answer in and as in depth as you want, as in depth as I can. So please, be nice to each other. Tell me what you think, whether it's positive or negative. I just want to hear some discussion below of what it means to be a new fan in of esports in 2026. So, speaking of, stay tuned for an exclusive interview at the end of the video talking about new fans and content in 2026. But with that, let's cut right over to the guide. All right, so the first part of this guide is what you might like about League if you are a new fan. So you might like watching League of Legends Esports if you enjoy strategy games, outplays and hype moments, team games, and speaking your own language. And to go a little bit more in depth on these things, strategy games, League is first and foremost a strategy game. It has a lot going on, but most of the time it's about making a plan, coordinating with your team, executing the plan correctly, and seeing what the outcome is. So it's really about like what you want to do, what objectives you might want to play for, who on your team is the strongest. So if you like strategizing, and you like watching, strategy games in general, I think you'd really like League. In kind of a new, unique way, because League strategy is pretty unique to the game itself. As well, there's outplays and hype moments. A lot of times during team fights or during the later stages of the game, there will be some pretty hype moments. There will be some crazy outplays. People can dodge abilities. You can barely win a fight, and it can be like razor thin. And those moments are always so exciting when you're watching a match. So if you like stuff like that, like I think of like outplays in like shooter games, you definitely get like a similar vibe here from the outplays that we find in League of Legends. As well, if you like team games, if you like to watch people work together for a collective goal, League is definitely that game. You cannot actually win. In the League community, there's a term called like 1v9, which means like you're like carrying by yourself, like single-handedly, even against your own team. You can't actually do that, especially in pro play. You need all five players to win. They need to work together. They have their voice comms. You need all five players to have teamwork in order to win. And if you like teamwork, I think you'll really like seeing how the teams coordinate with each other. And lastly, here I have, if you like speaking your own language, just a second ago I was explaining kind of an exclusive League of Legends term, 1v9. There's plenty of those that you'll learn just from watching the broadcast, from being part of the community, from following this channel, and even following the rest of the guide. I'll explain a lot of terminology. So if you like kind of speaking your own language and having something that's kind of exclusive to you, you feel like you're like part of something that not a lot of people know about or get to be part of, that is definitely what you'd find in the League community. You'd kind of be able to speak your own language talking about players. It's kind of similar to sports. A lot of people talk about sports, they'll talk about their terminology, their players, their teams, whatever. You definitely get that exact same vibe from talking about League. So, let's do a very basic overview here of League of Legends. So, there are 5 roles filled by 5 players. So, it's a team of 5 people competing against another team of 5 people. They are battling on Summoner's Rift. So, Summoner's Rift is the map you see in the image on the screen here, where there are 3 lanes. I'll kind of use my mouse to show you. This is top lane that follows from one side of the map to the other on the top of the screen here, or top of the map rather. This is mid lane that goes right through the middle of the map from base to base. This is bot lane that goes around and curves similar to top lane, but on the bottom side of the map. So these are the 3 lanes. And you might be like, well, if there's 3 lanes, then why are there 5 roles? So where you see each of these roles pictured is where they end up. So top laners go in top lane. I think that makes a lot of sense. Then we have the jungler, which is kind of in between the lanes. So junglers don't have a lane. They go all around the map. They help out their other laners. They help out their teammates, and they actually kill monsters in the jungle. And that's kind of what they do. They go around the map. They kill monsters. They're kind of how you get the most important objectives of the game. So they don't have a lane. Mid laners go mid lane. Again, I think that one makes a decent amount of sense to me. Then you have bot laners go bot lane alongside a support, which is the 5th role. So it goes 1 person in the top lane, 1 person in the mid lane, 2 people in the bot lane, and 1 jungler that can kind of go wherever they want. So there's 5 roles, 5 people, 3 lanes. And that's how it kind of works. They each have their own goals, their own missions, their own gameplay, their own champions that can be played in each role, which we'll go over just a little bit later. And players often specialize in one role or another, and they usually don't switch. It's not like you'd have one player play top lane for one game and then play jungle for another. Usually, players just stay with one role that they're really, really good at. So, you have 5 specialized roles, 5 specialized players. And the only thing I want you to understand here is that when you're watching a game of League, you have a nexus. So you can see this blue nexus on this side and a red nexus on this side. It's basically just a little structure with a big crystal inside. The only way you can win a game of League, like straight up, the only way you win a game of League is if you kill the enemy nexus. You have to push into their base, you have to kill their nexus, and you win. Even if the enemy champions are alive, they're going to try and defend it, but the only way you win is if you kill a nexus. So you have to take down turrets in each lane, you have to use your minions to push into their base and siege, that's kind of what we call it, where you're sieging, you're pushing into their base to kill their nexus. But the only thing I want you to understand here is there's 5 roles, 5 players in each, like 5 players, 1 in each role, and in order to win the game, you have to kill the enemy's nexus. That one thing, those 2 things right there, rather, make it so much easier to understand what's going on in League. Even when you get through the complicated stuff, none of that really matters as long as you're paying attention to the nexuses. If someone's pushing into another team's base, their goal is to kill that crystal. That's their only goal, 99% of the time. So keep that in mind. That's a very basic overview of League of Legends in general. Um, so let's keep moving. So now I want to give you a tour of lolesports.com. So this is the premier website to find all games from all leagues around the world. Yes, this is a global esport, if you didn't know that too. But there are 5 different major regions. I'm going to go over those, so I'll cut over to the guide now. So here is your very, hopefully pretty quick tour of lolesports.com. So as I mentioned in kind of that previous slide, LOL Esports is the place to go if you want to see what games are happening, who's playing, what time, and actually be able to watch them through the website, or at least find streams through the website. So this is what you'll see if you go to lolesports.com. I'll have the link in the description down below. I'll also put it on the screen for you right now. But this is what you'll see. See, if I go to the homepage, as soon as you load the website, this is what you're going to see. So it's going to have the current date. You can see there's no matches today, but that's okay. But we can see that upcoming on the 24th, on Saturday, there are 2 matches of the LCS. So this leads me into the first thing that I want you to understand about this website. So it is going to show you games from all around the world, which I kind of mentioned. So there are 5 major regions in League of Legends that you can see games from. There's one in North America, one in Europe, one in China, one in Korea, and one in the LCP, which is, I think, like Southeast Asia primarily. I know it used to be separate with like Vietnam and Japan, but they kind of combined all of them together. So there are five different major regions in League of Legends. If you want the description and like the name of each of them, the North American League is called the LCS. The European League is called the LEC. The Chinese League is called the LPL. The Korean League is called the LCK. And the Southeast Asian League is called the LCP. So there are five major regions. There are leagues played around the world in other places, but these are the five regions that are most, like, not important, but most popular, probably, most prominent. There's also notably the CBLOL, which is in South America. Um, but those are the leagues that you'll see on the website. And actually, how you control these things is if you go up here to where it says leagues, you can see all of the different options for you to see League of Legends Esports. So, first and foremost, they always want you to see the international events. So, Worlds, MSI, and First Stand are the different international events, meaning different regions play against each other. Those are the international events that happen every single year. But you can kind of see the other leagues that I was just telling you about here, the LCS, the LEC, the LPL, which is the Chinese league, the LCK, the Korean league, and the LCP, which is like Southeast Asia. So all these other ones are either like tier 2, so they're not like the highest level of pro play, or different tournaments or other things. But I'd say the most important ones to watch are these internationals, which you have to have selected, as well as these kind of five or six, including CBLOL, kind of more major region leagues to follow. But either way, if I wanted to say check out the European League, all I'd have to do is go ahead and click on LEC here. The page would reload, and now you can see I have all of the games from the LEC popping up on my screen. We have some starting also on Saturday for the LEC here. So we can see it's Saturday. It's based on the time of the game start. So we have all the ones starting at 9 in the morning for me because it's in Europe, so it's definitely later for them. But we have the game starting at 9 a.m. for Europe all the way until LCS, which starts at 2. So you can have leagues that are back to back in timing. You can see this one starts exactly at the same time as us. But say I'm like, oh, well, I'm not interested in Europe anymore. I can just deselect it. Same thing with Korea. Korea is probably the most popular league. They've won most of the international events in recent history. So Korea is probably the best league in the world, a lot of people will say. So you can always look at the games that are upcoming for this league. So say I want to watch a Korean League of Legends game, I can see KT Rolster versus T1 is starting at 1 a.m. tomorrow. So if I wanted to tune in, I could. And timing's going to be harder depending on exactly where you are. But the beauty of League is that there's always something going on. There's always a game for you to watch somewhere around the world. Whether the League, there's always something to be excited for. So I primarily watch LCS because that's the North American League. So you can see that I have the games of scheduling up here, and you can see it starts very, very soon on January 24th. And one other thing I will mention is I'll go back to the Korean League here. So I showed you that, it says tomorrow, it says whatever day it is, and what games these are going to be. If you scroll back up, you can see a full history of games that have already happened. So say I missed the games on Saturday, January 17th. I can go and see, I was like, oh, BFX and Bro played each other. It has a little spoiler blocker here. So if you don't want to see the outcome of the game, you don't have to. You can click on it. Spoiler warning. This was a while ago, so hopefully no one's worried. But you can click on it and see that this series went 2 games to BFX and 1 game to Bro. So that's kind of how it works. You can see all the games past and future and present if they're live um, on this website based on whatever one of the 5 or 6 leagues you want to watch. You can click whatever you want, you can see whatever games you want, and this is kind of how you figure out what's going on for League of Legends. So, actually, let me show you if a game is going on. or has been going on, you can always click this little watch button. So if you click the watch button, it will pull up a VOD of the event, or what we call a video on demand. This is just like a replay of the event. And this is a little weird. I'm not sure why it's like this. Oh, okay, cool. So you can see this is the YouTube video. So I pull it up in here. I can watch it in the website if I want to. I can be like, oh, I missed this game. Let me go watch it. But say I wanted to watch this on YouTube, all I'd have to do is go and click watch on YouTube. Also, sometimes this will pull up as a Twitch stream if it's live. If it's a live game, it'll pull up as a Twitch stream. So you can always just click, on the Twitch icon on the title of it and pull it up on Twitch as well. So I didn't mean to full screen that, but that's okay. So I'm going to go back to the home screen here, but I won't be able to show you right now, unfortunately. But if a game is live, you will be able to click this play button, and instead of it showing you a video that's already been recorded and posted to YouTube, it'll show you the live game, either a live stream on YouTube or a live stream on Twitch. So if you wanted to watch a game, all you'd have to do is come in here, be like, oh, this game's going on right now, click the play button, and you can start watching. So hopefully that makes some sense for how you find everything, how you find games to watch them. There's a lot of other things on this website, like the events and standings, the power rankings, all that good stuff. But I think I'll save that for another day. What I wanted to show you here, what I hope you're taking away from this, is that you can pull up to this website, you can see all the different leagues from around the world, you can see what games are coming up, you can see what games have been played. And yeah, those are kind of the things that I hope you are getting out of this little website tour. All right, so now you have the most important part of watching League, which is how to find a game and how to actually watch it. So you can go to the website, you can pick a league that you want to watch, you can even see the internationals if they're going on for what you want to watch, and then you can click on the game and you can start watching. I think that is the most important step to you learning what is going on, to you enjoying League, is to just actually start watching it. So congrats there. Step one done. Now let's talk about how to understand what's going on and how to follow the story of the stream, so to speak. So if you're watching a game live or recorded, there are going to be 5 different phases or steps to a game or to a stream. There's going to be the draft phase. There's going to be level 1 in the game. There's going to be the early game, mid game, and late game. So that's kind of how the match progresses. That's how the stream progresses. So we're going to go over every single step of each of those. So, getting into drafting. Drafting essentially is when you draft champions. So, you might know of a draft in like other sports where you pick players for like your fantasy team or something like that. Drafting in League means you get to pick your champions. So I mentioned earlier that there are 5 roles and there's different champions that can go in every role. So this is where you pick the best champion for your role, given the pick order, which I'm going to go over the order in which you pick in a second. But the first thing I want you to understand is the difference between red side and blue side. So I'm going to go back really quickly here to this map where we see the 2 nexuses here. So there's a red nexus and a blue nexus here. So what we mean by red and blue side is just what side of the map you start on. So red side champions are going to start over here, and that's where their base is. Blue side champions are going to start over here, and that's where their base is. So on the draft, you actually get to choose whether or not you want red side or blue side. So usually the team that is either, it really depends on the format, but one of the teams gets to choose whether it's like a coin flip or whether it's because they're a stronger team or a weaker team. One team gets to choose one side and the other team gets the other side, essentially. So this used to be a little bit different, and I'll kind of explain that after I explain the second thing on this slide too. So then there is first pick versus second pick, which is kind of what they're calling it. And this is new this year. So it used to be if you had blue side, you automatically got first pick. So if you picked blue side, you got to pick first in the draft. And if you picked red side, you got to pick second in the draft. But now they've actually split up these two things. So they like to make my job a little bit harder trying to show you guys these things by always changing it. But essentially, first pick gets to pick the first champion of the draft, and second pick gets to pick the last champion of the draft. Is kind of their main gimmick. Is say one person plays a certain champion, and the red side team has a champion that's really, really strong against that character. They have a chance to pick it right at the end of the draft. So they have what we call a counter pick, where you get to see what the enemies have already chosen and pick against it. And I think this will make a little bit more sense once we get into the next slide too. But for now, you should know that teams can either be on red side or blue side, depending on the color of their nexus, and they can either have first pick or second pick, depending on which one they want. That's kind of a strategy thing, so teams might prefer different picks. So after the team decides if they want red or blue side and first or second pick, they then have to go into picking and banning champions. So this is probably the most important, but also maybe the most complicated part of the drafting process. So just like you can pick a champion, you can also ban a champion. So before the game even starts, you actually get 3 bans. So you get to ban 3 champions that you don't want the enemies playing. Um, at the beginning of a draft. And it's notable, you as well, you don't get to pick them either. So you pick 3 champions for each team, so a total of 6 that you don't want anyone playing. So these can be champions that are way too strong. These can be champions that are really good against the champions that you want to play. But either way, you get to ban 6 champions at first. And then after 3 champions have been picked, you get to ban an additional 2. So I know this is a little complicated, but if you look at the order, the picking order, just below the banning champions, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. So you get your first bans, which are those first 3 bans that I talked about. Then team 1 picks 1 champion. Then team 2 picks 2 champions. Then team 1 picks 2 champions. So both teams, and then team 2 have picked 1 champion. So essentially both teams have picked 3 characters for this first half of the draft phase, is kind of what they call it. Sorry, it's really complicated to explain in a lot of ways. But essentially you have your first bans, then both teams pick 3 champions, then you have your second bans, so you get to ban 2 more champions now that you've seen part of the enemy's team. Then team 2 gets to pick 1 champion. Then team 1 gets to pick 2 champions, so they have all 5 on their side. And then team 2 gets to pick their last champion. Sorry, it is very hard to keep track of all this in my head, but this diagram that you see on screen is correct. It goes ban, team 1, team 2, team 1, team 2, ban, team 2, team 1, team 2. So it does alternate back and forth. It's just about the number of champions that you pick usually that can be different. But you can see the team and then the number of champions that they pick in parentheses here. So actually, I'll cut in right here and give you a little example of the draft so that hopefully this will make a little more sense. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of an example here. And I'm going to try to include champions and their roles, but it doesn't really matter that you know who the champions are right now or any of these icons or anything. I just want you to understand pick order. So this is kind of an older tool, so it hasn't said, red side can have first pick or anything yet, like I explained kind of in the last slide. But this is assuming that one team is on blue side and they have the first pick. They get first pick, red side gets second pick. So what's going to happen is there are going to be 3 bans. So blue side is going to ban a champion, red side is going to ban a champion, blue side is going to ban a champion, red side's going to ban a champion, and so on until there are 3 bans for both teams. So we have 6 champions banned at the top here. Then blue side is going to pick 1 champion. They get the first champion of the draft. So usually you want to pick something strong. You want to pick a really powerful champion here because you get the first one. You get first dibs. Then the red side gets to pick 2 champions. So they get to see this 1 champion, pick 2 champions in kind of response to it. Then blue side gets to pick 2 champions in response as well. So now they've picked 3 champions, and red side gets to pick 1 champion in response. So this is what we call the first half of the draft. That's why there's like a little separation here. This is the first half. Each team has picked 3 champions, kind of alternating, goes 1, 2, 2, 1. Then we have what's called the second draft, or second ban phase. Sorry, so second half of draft, really. But red side's going to ban a champion, then blue side's going to ban a champion, then red side's going to ban a champion, then blue side's going to ban a champion. Until now, we've done all 5 bans for both teams, then red side is going to pick a champion. So they get the first pick of the second half of the draft. Then blue side gets something kind of unique too. They get 2 picks here, and they get to round out their draft fully. So they get to pick a full team comp here first. So if there's still any strong champions left, they get to pick them up. Then red side get their kind of unique buff here. They get to take this R5 counter pick, is what a lot of times people will call it, the last pick of the draft. They get to pick the final champion allowed in that game. So they get to see the whole enemy team comp before they pick their champion here. And it's important to note that this is not going to go in role order. It's not going to be like this champion's playing top lane, this champion's playing jungle. They pick champions in whatever order makes sense. So once they have all 5 champions selected, they can switch with each other to make it the correct role. But the main thing I want you to get out of this little example is the alternating picks. So we have, 3 bans, 3 bans. We have 1, 2, 2, 1. Second half goes 1, 2, 1 until both sides have selected their 5 champions. So this is a little complicated, but I wanted to run through this so you can kind of understand, which team's picking when. The casters are going to talk about what champions might be picked, and so you can kind of follow that. But yeah, this is just a little example of what a draft might look like in order when you're watching a stream. Now that we've done a little draft example for you, hopefully you understand red side versus blue side and which side they choose and who gets first and second pick. And hopefully you understand kind of how that process works, where one team picks, then the other team picks, etc. That's basically how you see, or how the draft goes for what champions are chosen. So that's how you see who they're going to play in that given game. And alongside those notes, I have this, which is my tier list for champions you're likely to see to not likely to see. And that's kind of the progression here. So I know this is a lot to take in. I'm not expecting you to stare at this for forever or anything, but I will have both these photos of these tier lists linked down below, so you can pull them up, you can download them, you can save them, do whatever you want, just so you kind of know what's normal and not normal. I know you're not going to be like, whoa, I saw, I know everything about all these champions. That's not what this is meant for. This is meant for you to be like, oh, I see that this champion was picked, and if you don't know, this first one is Ari. And so you see, oh, they picked Ari, but she's very likely to be seen. So that's not anything too crazy. But then say you see let's go right here for Kindred is who this champion is. Say you see someone lock in Kindred, you're like, whoa, that's a lot more rare. Like this is something to pay attention to in the game. That's what I'm looking for here. And this right side of the screen, this other tier list, takes basically whatever's in pretty uncommon and above, so kind of excluding the rare or if picked they're losing category. So kind of excluding those, it takes all the champions that you're most likely to see and puts them in their roles. So these are all the champions that should be played in top lane. These are all the champions that should be played in jungle, mid lane, bot lane, support, all the way down. So this is just meant for you to be like, oh, these champions are normal, these champions are more rare, and this is what role they'll go in. So this is just supposed to be a little bit of a reference for you if you are watching a draft to kind of at least understand if a draft is kind of crazy or more normal. All right, so drafting has already been pretty complicated so far, but I'm going to add in one more monkey wrench into this explanation. So, generally, League is usually played in best of threes or best of fives. So, you have to win 2 out of 3 games or 3 out of 5 games to win the series. So, this is where this new-ish concept of fearless drafting comes in. So, basically, last year they fully implemented it. Last year's Worlds was the first Fearless Worlds, which is actually part of the screenshot that you see here. This is from the 2025 Worlds Championship. And essentially, all it means is that any champion played by either team is automatically banned for the rest of the series. The teams don't have to ban it themselves during draft, they just can't play it again. So you can see a little zoom in here of the fearless bans. This is what they call series bans on the screen here. So these are champions that have been played earlier on in the series. They have one for each role. I zoomed in a little so you can see it a little better, but this is like the mid laners that have already been played in the series. So they are ones that cannot be played again. So without any further bans, they can't play those champions for the rest of the series. That's all Fearless means. It was generally adapted because there's, over 170 champions, and it's like, it's insane. There's so many champions that you can play. So having every champion be pickable every game means you get a lot of the same champions. So we used to have it where it would be the same 2 top laners playing against each other every game. It would be the same 2 mid laners playing against each other every single game. And it got kind of boring from a fan perspective. So they added fearless drafting. You can't play the same champion more than once in a series. Of course, if you play another series against another team, every champion is open again. So fearless drafting, hopefully it makes a lot of sense, but it's just for that specific series that you're playing against that team, any champion that has already been played cannot be played again by either team. That's about it. Alongside that, I have the game tally here, which just shows you what game we're on. So in this example, this was game 5 of the 2025 finals. So this means that KT Rolster, this team, has won 2 games, designated by the 2 white tokens, and are still waiting for their 3rd win. Same with T1. So from this, you could tell it's game number 5. Both teams have won 2 games, and they're moving on to a game number 5 to decide who wins the 3rd game and who wins the series. So hopefully this makes some sense for drafting. Fearless drafting is pretty new. A lot of people still talk about it, kind of debate whether or not it was good or bad, but I think that it's really cool. We've seen more champions played than ever before in Worlds, in normal series, in normal leagues, and I think that's a really good thing. I think that playing more champions is a really good expression of skill. So now we're done with drafting. We're moving on to level 1 of the game. So this is a pretty handy reference sheet as well. I will also have a screenshot of this linked below if you want this for reference. But level 1, this is when they've picked all their champions, they've loaded into the game, but before anything really happens. So there's a little bit of a lull right as soon as the game starts, where both teams are kind of standing there. There used to be a lot more strategies. You can see I have a little section over here for level 1 strategies. There used to be about a minute for teams to do whatever they wanted in the game. They could run out on the map. They could go try to fight each other. You'd have a lot of fights at level 1, actually, in the past. I said to do some shenanigans. That's often what they're called. People will do a lot of interesting stuff. But in 2026, just recently, they actually shortened the start time of the game by 30 seconds. So minions spawn about 30 seconds earlier, meaning the whole game starts about 30 seconds earlier. So it'll be a lot less exciting to watch level 1 than it used to be. Teams might still try to do something, but they have to do it in about half the time they had before. So keep an eye out at level 1. Sometimes they do funny stuff, but usually it's probably going to be they're waiting for the game to start, essentially. They're going to go to their lanes, they're going to wait for the game to start, and that's about it. But you know what level 1 is a great time for? Is to see all the information that's on the screen. So it's a great time for you to look and see all of the information that's available to you on this beautiful broadcast, because there is a lot going on here, and I know that it can be very overwhelming. So I've broken it down into 8 categories that you see down here, 1 through 8. So number one is kind of the most information all at once. It tracks the champions. You can see their icons here. It tracks their score. That's what 000 is. That is kills, deaths, and assists of each player. It tracks their items, which are these icons over here. It also tracks their summoner spells, which I'll talk about in just a second on the next slide. And it also tells you their player names. So you can see who's playing, its Doran, its owner, its faker, etc. So there's a lot of information all kind of jammed into this one little section down here. But that's probably the most important part to look at. You can see who has a lot of kills, who has a lot of deaths. You can see what items they're buying. But that won't make as much sense unless you play the game yourself. But either way, a lot of good information down here that's readily available for you. Number two are the player cameras, which are really fun to look at, actually, but are a little less probably important than the other things. Sometimes you see funny reactions. Sometimes you see them doing cool stuff. Sometimes the stream will show replays of the cameras if they did funny things. So it's just cool to be able to see the players, as they're playing. But yeah, that's where the player cameras are. There's one for this team and one for this team, so they're on either side where you can see the player cameras. And number three on here is the mini map. So that's right over here where you can see all the mini icons, hence mini map, of each of the champions in the game. So it's important to note that they can't see each other. The enemy teams can't see each other unless they're in a certain vision range of each other. But since we're watching the game, we're spectating, we can see everyone. So if you look down here at any point in the game, you can see where all 5 members of each team are at and where they're going. So you can see, wow, there's 4 members of one of the teams that's on one side of the map. That's a great way to be like, well, I think something's going to happen over there soon. So minimap can be cool to look at if you want to see where everyone's going when the directed camera isn't actually showing them. So just a little bit cool way to look at some info there. Number 4 up here are the 2 current teams that are playing, as well as the game tally. So we can see that it's T1 and KT, same as the last screenshot that I showed you. So those are the 2 teams that are playing. It also says what seed they are. So these are 2 Korean teams. T1 came in as the 4th seed, and KT came in as the 3rd seed. So that's just like a little bit of info up there. It also has their logos next to it, and it also has the game tally, which I accidentally put the 4 kind of right on top of. But just like the last slide here, it'll show what game in the series we are. So exact same thing will be up here where these 4s are. Number 5, right below that, on either side, will show the number of objectives that have been taken by either team, which I'll get into this a little later, but it can help you determine who's currently winning if they have a lot of objectives, if they have high numbers underneath there. So that's just a little bit so you understand kind of what that is. Number 6 is the game timer, which I also kind of covered a little bit, which I didn't really mean to. But that's just the timer that ticks down. It ticks and shows how long the game's been going on. That one's pretty simple. It's just, it says 10 minutes. The game's been going on for 10 minutes. It just shows you if it's kind of like a short or long game. It can also help you differentiate between early, mid, and late game, which I'll also talk about in just a little bit here. So then we have 7 over here, which similar to 5, these are about the objectives in the game, the like epic monsters, but they just tell you little timers of when they spawn. So we can see that this dragon is the icon over here, spawns in 4 minutes, and Baron spawns in 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Or sorry, Grubs would spawn in 7 minutes and 30 seconds. So it just shows you the next most prominent objectives that it will be spawning. So sometimes it's nice to find those and be like, oh, in about 4 minutes, I know that a fight's going to be breaking out. So keep an eye out for that. And last but not least, it doesn't show it here because this is a level 1 screenshot, but usually right underneath the teams over here on the little bar, you will see who's leading in gold. And gold is really how you determine who's winning, which again, I have another slide about a little bit later, but this is where it will show how much they are ahead and who's ahead in gold. So that's important to know. But again, I'll have a picture of this down below so you can have a little bit of a guide if you're watching a game and be like, okay, well, I can pinpoint where all of this information will be. As I referred to earlier, here are the summoner spells that each player gets. You get to choose 2 of these at the beginning of every match as a player. So this is down at the first section of our little diagram here. You can see the summoner spells are these itty bitty little icons here, taken by every player on both sides. It'll be able to show you there. But these are the different summoner spells and their icons, so you can recognize them. So far and away, the most common summoner spell that you're going to see is Flash. Now, Flash is essentially an instant teleport to a short distance instant teleport to any location towards your mouse. So that sounds kind of complicated, but all it means is you can basically instantly be somewhere else if you click the button. It has a really long cooldown. Actually, most of these have really long cooldowns, but it's most used to try and dodge abilities, to try and chase after people quickly, and it's often one of the most flashy, pun intended, parts of League of Legends. A lot of pro players really like to use their flash in creative ways. So you should see everyone running Flash with like very, very few exceptions. Everyone should be running Flash in a pro game of League. So you'll probably see this, as we can see here, next to every single one of our champion icons over here. Next up is Teleport, which I'd say is the second most common one. So it teleports you to a new location, similar to Flash, but it can be anywhere on the map, regardless of distance, and it takes about 6 seconds. So it's not meant for in the middle of combat, dodging stuff. It's meant to be, I'm in top lane, but my team is fighting in bot lane, so I'm going to teleport there, and I'm going to be part of that fight. That's what it's most commonly used for. So these two are far and away the ones you need to know the most about. I'd say the next most important actually is probably Smite. I'm going to hop over here. This is exclusive to junglers, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Smite fights later, but it's exclusive to junglers, and all it does is it does damage to an epic monster, or normal monster for that matter. The goal is it secures the objective for your team. If you get the last instance of damage on an objective for your team, you claim it. So Smite is really good at that. It does like 1,000 damage, I think up to like 1.5 thousand damage to an objective, and the goal is that is what kills it. You're trying to wait to the last moment and smite it to get the objective for your team. So it's exclusive to junglers. That's kind of their main gimmick, is they control objectives. The rest of these are lesser used, but they are used occasionally in pro play. Barrier gives your champion a shield to soak up some damage that you're taking or about to take. Ignite burns an enemy champion for extra damage, so that one's pretty common too if you're trying to deal extra damage. Ghost gives your champion extra movement speed for a short duration, also can be pretty common. Cleanse cleanses the negative effects off your champion, whether that is Ignite, which actually counts, or Exhaust, which also counts. But mostly it's used like things for crowd control, like if you're stunned or slowed by an enemy champion, then you can cleanse it off. So a lot of times we'll see bot laners take cleanse if they need to avoid CC to stay alive. And we'll talk a little more about that later once we get to team fighting. Exhaust slows and reduces the damage of an enemy champion. So point and click, they do less damage, they move slower. That's about it. Heal, similar to Barrier, gives you more HP to help block damage, but Heal gives you more health directly. Barrier gives you a shield. So just shield fades after a couple seconds. That health will remain until you heal or die. So these are the summoner spells. The most important two are definitely Flash and Teleport. So make sure you keep an eye on these if you're watching a game of League of Legends. All right, so we've gone over summoner spells. You know a little bit about what each champion is capable of at the start of the game, what abilities they have. Now let's talk a little bit about as soon as the game actually begins. So this is after level 1. This is minutes 1 through 15. So this is the first 15 minutes of the game. Each role has different responsibilities, which we're going to go over in the next slide. But the primary goal for everyone is to get gold. So everyone wants to get gold. They want to get strong. They want to be able to fight more later on. There will be some action in the early game, usually. Sometimes it is pretty inactive, but usually there's something that happens, a kill or two, someone takes an objective, something important does happen in the early game almost every game. But the main goal is for people to kind of chill, get strong, try to get small advantages that they can kind of build up later on in the game. So this is what we also call the early laning phase. So you'll hear people say laning phase talking about the early game. This means both top laners are in the top lane. It means both mid laners are in the mid lane playing against each other. And it usually means, again, both bot lane duos, rather, are in the bot lane. So everyone's in their lanes, they're fighting each other, and it's pretty standard. So everything is pretty predictable. Everyone's gonna be in their lane. Everything's gonna be good. They're just gonna be fighting. So this is often the time of the game where the casters, the shoutcasters who are talking over the game, will talk about players. They'll talk about teams. They'll talk about maybe what they're even looking for in the match. This is kind of their time to narrate and make something kind of interesting happen. Well, the gameplay itself isn't that exciting. League definitely kind of ramps up as the game goes on. It's pretty slow in the early game, and it kind of builds up later. But what I want you to understand here is it's about the first 15 minutes of the game, and the laning phase is usually what we say to describe this part of the game. So, like I said in the last slide, we're going to go over each role during the early game. So, as far as top lane goes, they're usually in their lane and left alone. Top lane is often called an island, meaning no one else goes there, it's just the two top laners. So, one thing to look for here is solo kills, meaning one top laner kills the other one without any help. Solo kills are very important in top lane. If someone gets a kill, usually it means that the one who got the kill will stay ahead for a while because they got an advantage in a lane where usually teammates don't help out in the early game. So they'll be able to keep essentially bullying the other player if they get a solo kill. So look for some kills in the top lane. If there are none, it's probably pretty even. It's also defined by turret taking and CS advantages. So turrets are the things I mentioned earlier that are in each lane to protect your base. Top laners are pretty good at taking towers usually. You'll have a lot of split push champions, is what we call them, where they can split, meaning split away from their team on the other side of the map and push. So a lot of times you'll see them hitting towers, you'll see them killing a lot of minions, and you'll see them putting pressure on the map. But in the early game, top laners usually are just alone on their little island fighting each other, and that's about it. They're probably like the least exciting role in the early game. Then talking about jungle. So junglers like to clear their camps. They're monsters, as I mentioned earlier. They clear their jungle camps all the way down, either heading from top side to bot side or bot side to top side. They usually don't interact much with the rest of their team, except for the occasional gank, which a gank is when the jungler comes in and helps one of their allies in the lane. And early objective fights. So dragons do spawn around 5 minutes in the early game. So junglers might be fighting around that first dragon depending on how their lanes are going. So junglers will move around the map a lot, and if any early action is going to happen, it's probably going to happen around the jungler. So mid lane is usually pretty like standard too. They just kind of fight each other, they push the lane, they get their gold. Sometimes there are solo kills, but it's a little less frequent than top lane, I would say. Mid laners like to move and roam a lot. So sometimes you'll see a mid laner that they might move down to bot lane or even up to top lane and try to help out their allies too, kind of similar to the jungler. Um, but they mostly are just there to collect gold in the early game. They mostly just want to scale, they want to get their items, and they want to get more powerful for later. Bot laners are a more extreme version of this. They really, really, really like gold. In the new season, they actually got extra gold added to their role, so very nice for them. Their main goal is to just not die and get items for later. So they really want gold, they want to not die, and that's kind of basically all a bot laner is going to be thinking about in the early game. And to help them with that, we have our supports. So supports are there to protect their bot laners. That's their primary goal. They can move around the map if they want to because there is someone else in their lane. So they could leave their bot lane alone. They could move up to other lanes in the early game, but it's not as common as I think it used to be for supports to do that. But their primary goal is to make sure that their bot lane doesn't die and to essentially help them out in the early game. So this is a problem, and this is why I want to lead into this little mini section here that I won't have for the other, mid and late game sections. But this is how to stay entertained, because the early game section can be it can be kind of boring. Let's be a little honest. If nothing happens, if there's no kills, if the jungler's not doing anything crazy, it can definitely get pretty boring in the early game. So this is how to stay entertained. It I'm putting it here because it's mostly for the early game, but it could apply at any time in the game. I just wanted to put it here because I think it's most relevant during the early game. So first and foremost, as I kind of alluded to earlier, listen to the casters. And I think this is actually one of my biggest pieces of advice for new fans in general. You should always, always, always listen to the casters. The casters have valuable information. They'll explain things that are going on. They'll explain the mindsets and the strategies of the teams. As I wrote here, their job is to find exciting storylines, trends, and projections in the match. So if you don't know what's going on, if you're a little bored, listen to the casters. They'll be talking about players, they'll be talking about expectations, they'll be talking about storylines in the league, and that's really where you can stay entertained when the gameplay itself is still ramping up. So, first and foremost, listen to the casters. Next, if the casters aren't talking about anything that interests you, which is pretty rare, but sometimes it happens to me, if I just, if I'm not that excited about a certain player that they're talking about, maybe I'm not as interested in that section of their cast. But you can always look at the scoreboard, and that's my second piece of advice. So the scoreboard, as I went over kind of a few slides ago, has a lot of information in it. So if you don't see any storylines that the casters are talking about that interest you, find your own storylines. Look at the scoreboard, look at the objective timers, look at the gold, look at the kills, look at the number of items that each character has, each player has, and hopefully that'll help you find a little bit more. You're like, whoa, the casters aren't even talking about this, but I see that one bot laner has two items and the other bot laner only has one. Like that's an interesting storyline. You know that even if they don't have any kills, that the first bot laner is ahead right now. They're stronger. So the casters like to talk about things like that, but if they're not, you can kind of seek out little grains of information yourself. Um, and see kind of what you can infer from the scoreboard. It's a little intimidating at first, but I promise you can pull out some really cool information and really cool storylines if you're paying attention to kind of the stats, the scoreboard, that kind of thing that I explained for level 1, where all of that info's on there. So, as I said, looking at objective timers can also help you figure out when the next fights will happen. So that can help you like anticipate like a little bit more about what you're looking for. If I know that a next dragon spawns in 3 minutes, I'll be like, okay, cool. So like 3 more minutes, there'll be something cool that'll happen. And that can be one thing that you look for. And if all else fails, if you don't find anything interesting in the scoreboard, the casters aren't really talking about anything interesting, you can always watch the junglers. I think that most of the action, especially in the early game, is going to happen around the junglers. So they're going to be the ones moving around the map. They're going to be the ones going into lanes and influencing how lanes are going. So look at your mini map on the stream, look at where the junglers are and try to kind of follow where that action might take place. And maybe you'll see something interesting as you learn more about the game. Early game is gone. Now we're in the mid game. So this is where the game starts really ramping up. This is when you see more exciting plays, you see people moving around the map, you see those objectives really start to stack up and kind of be scary for the other team is in kind of this stage of the game. So this is minutes about 15 to 25, but it kind of depends on exactly when that switch comes to be late game later on, which I'll talk about kind of in the late game section. But mid game really starts when the first turrets start falling. I realize I said turrets before, and this says towers, but those are synonyms. We either call them turrets, we call them towers. Either way, They mean the same thing. It's the structures that I told you about earlier. So the mid game really starts when towers start falling. So in top lane, especially, first turret's pretty common. Bot lane, first turret's pretty common. Um, People move around the map because the towers are gone. Usually, one thing that you'll notice is a lot of teams will have their bot laners go into mid lane, and then their mid and top laners go into bot and top lane, respectively. So a lot of times they'll move the bot laner to mid lane. I won't go too deep into this, but essentially it's a strategy because the bot laner now has their gold, now has their items. So we want them to be part of any fight that happens. And mid lane gives them the best access to be part of a lot of team fights. So they move the bot lane towards mid lane is one way you can tell that it's the mid game. And here's really where the tension builds around the objectives, as I was kind of talking about earlier. So dragons are going to start spawning. The Baron spawns at about 20 minutes, which is the biggest and most important objective in the game, in my opinion. So you have a lot that's really big to fight for, and this is when champions get really strong. So it's really important that you pay attention during this part of the game. There's going to be a lot of exciting fights. It's going to kind of start ramping up. And my second point for mid game here is that team play is going to increase. So in the early game, we talked about how it's really just isolated. People do their own thing. You're in your own lane. Top lane especially is just an island. In mid game, that all goes out the window. So in mid game, teams play with each other. Top laners have the teleport summoner spell that I told you about earlier. Mid laners usually do too. So oftentimes they will be nearby, ready, or sorry, not nearby. They'll be far away, ready to teleport in, ready to join a fight if it happens. So they're coordinating with their team. They're talking more. They're coming up with plans. They're saying, we're going to fight around this objective at this time. Be ready, everyone. And that's kind of where this team play really starts to click in League of Legends. So this is the ramp up. This is where you'll start seeing more team fights, which I'll talk about a little more later, what that means. But this is really where you start to see the strategy come in to League of Legends. This is where it becomes a strategy game besides just, I'm going to fight someone 1v1 in the top lane. So to go over each role as I did for the early game, top lane will push the side lanes. So I told you earlier that side lanes, that should say bot lane and top lane, actually for side lanes, but that's okay. So they will push the side lanes, which are the bottom and top side of the bottom and top lanes of the map, to try and pressure the map and take towers. So their goal is to go and push towards the enemy base, put some pressure on it, because essentially if they're going to go and threaten to take turrets, the enemy team has to respond to that. So usually you'll see top laners either in top lane or in bot lane during the mid part of the game. And they'll be using or waiting to use their teleport, as I mentioned just a second ago. So they'll be looking for team fights to join with their teleport while they're kind of pressuring the map. So they have this kind of double-edged sword here where if they stay in either of those side lanes, they could probably take towers, put some pressure on the enemy base, but their team might need them for the team fight. They might lose the team fight because they didn't teleport in. So that's where this top laner kind of has a decision to make. If they teleport in, they're giving up the ability to push towers and take them. But if they don't teleport in, they might lose that team fight. So top laners have this kind of interesting dynamic going on, but the biggest thing that you should look for top laners is when they teleport into team fights. That's what the broadcast tends to focus on. Team fights are usually when the game's decided, pretty much. So junglers will continue to clear their camps during this time, but they're going to start looking for more plays, specifically on the side lanes if they're trying to catch out the enemy top laner, or around mid lane. So they might try to go and catch out the enemy bot laner, again, who's now in mid lane. I know this is a little confusing, but try to stick with me here. But they're going to be looking for plays on either the bot laner or the enemy side laners, essentially. They have to be at every objective fight to make sure that they can try and secure it. So we talked about Smite earlier, how Smite is the summoner spell that makes you actually secure an objective. But they have to be at every single objective fight. That's kind of their responsibility, especially in the mid, and spoiler alert, in the late game too. They have to be at every single objective fight. Otherwise, they're kind of not doing their job. So mid lane usually does the same thing as top lane, but they tend to stay on the same side as the objective. So say we're looking at Baron. I didn't really talk about this yet too much, so apologies there. But Baron would spawn on the top side of the map, and so mid laners would usually want to be in top lane if we're fighting around Baron. I'm not going to go too deep into the strategy there. All you really need to know here is that mid lane functions basically the same as top lane. They're going to be in one of the side lane roles, and they're also going to be looking to teleport into a team fight once it starts, if they're not already part of it. Next, we have the bot lane, which they should have more items by now. They should be a lot stronger. And their main goal is to stay in the mid lane and not die pretty much still. Their main shining point is the late game. Again, a little bit of a spoiler alert there for bot lane. But they really want to get to the late game without dying as much as possible. So they're going to keep getting gold. They're going to try to be part of any team fights that matter. That, they shouldn't have to run to a team fight, and they never usually take teleport. They shouldn't have to teleport to a team fight. They should just be part of any fights that happen off the bat, and they should be starting to really ramp up and deal some damage. As for supports, they have the option to stick with their bot laners if they want to stay with their bot lane and continue protecting them, but they're also the main control over vision, which I will talk about a little more later too. I know I keep saying that, but I'll talk a little more about vision later. But supports have the main onus of vision is on the support. They have the most control over it. So in the mid game, their job is to make sure that they are getting as much information for their team as possible, especially before objective fights. And that's their main job. Okay, so the last phase of the game, the late game here, is minutes 25 plus, where we have the most kind of chaos, highest tension, and honestly the most exciting moments of the game. Usually. Sometimes some crazy stuff happens early on, but late game is really where it's at when you get into a game of League of Legends. So late game starts when the game is endable, meaning that either team can go, are capable of going and taking the enemy nexus if they kill the other team, at least most of the other team. So say they kill all 5 members of one team, they get what we call an ace, which is where you kill all 5 members of the other team. If they get an ace, then they can end the game. That's how usually I think of late game. So it's a little bit, again, a little bit weird to try and like find this transition between mid game and late game, but usually that threshold is around 25 minutes. So if that gives you a little bit of idea. So the threat of the game being over if someone dies is what makes it so exciting. It's really high stakes. You can't make any mistakes at this point in the game. If you die before a big team fight as part of your team, you're not doing your job. Your team's likely going to lose that team fight, and that could cost you the game. There are ways where, you can win a team fight without one member of your team, but that's very difficult and not very common. So this is where you really see big team fights, which it might be a little poor placement by me, but I have a little section where I'm going to talk about team fights later, even though I've already mentioned it like 6 times by now. But at this point in the game, 5v5 team fights, where all 5 players are fighting against all 5 players from the enemy team, are pretty much the norm. You go around whatever objectives are up, you take them with all 5 members of your team, and this is where you really get those hype moments. This is where you get, players using all their abilities, doing all that it takes, trying to scrap their way to victory, trying to win in these really chaotic, high stakes team fights. And that's what I love about the late game in League of Legends. So, to go over each role, this is really going to be team fight focused because that's kind of the defining factor of the late game. But top laners are usually frontliners. So they are on the front lines, they're in front of the rest of their team. Their goal is to block abilities, soak up damage, and essentially be an immovable wall for their team. They also could be like fighters, where their job is to try and go kill the enemy carries, either the mid lane or bot lane. Um, those are pretty common in pro play too, but top lane you usually get one of the two. They're either like a big bulky tank is what we call them, where they're kind of that front line, they soak damage, they're an immovable object, or kind of that like fighter where they go and try to kill the enemies themselves. So top lane is a little bit picky and choosy depending on which one you get. Um, Junglers also vary pretty wildly here. They can be tanks, as I was just talking about. They also can be more like fighters. They also can honestly really be like anything. There's like a jungler for everything. But I think most commonly they're either tanks or fighters, kind of similar to top lane here. So their goal is to try and soak damage, and same thing as top lane. But their main goal is to get those objectives. Objective securing matters even more in the late game because one objective can be the difference between you winning the game and losing the game. So definitely high stakes for the junglers here. Mid laners have now scaled. They are high damage carries. Their goal is to find creative angles and deal tons of damage in a team fight while staying alive. So, kind of similar to bot lane here, as you'll see in a second, but their goal is to deal lots and lots of damage. So, bot laners have waited the whole game for this. Their entire role has led up to this moment. They are very strong now. They deal the highest amount of damage in the game. They're similar to mid lanes that they deal a ton of damage, but theirs is usually DPS or damage per second, where they deal a lot of consistent damage, where mid laners would usually deal a lot more burst damage. So mid laners will deal all their damage at once, just like all at once, pile on the damage. Bot laners are really good at dealing a lot of damage over time. So that's kind of the difference there, but they're both essentially the same role. They deal a lot of damage in the team fight. Last but not least, supports can either kind of be tanks and engagers, so they can also be like a damage soaking ability blocking role for their team, or they can kind of be what we call enchanters or protectors, where their main goal is to keep the bot lane and mid lane, especially, alive. So they can either, use crowd control to try and keep the enemy team away from their team, or use things like heals and shields, kind of similar to what we talked about earlier with heal and barrier. They can try to keep their team alive as best they can. That's usually the support's role, is they just want to keep the rest of their team alive and let them do their jobs. That's kind of fundamentally what it is. But let's get into this because I know I've talked about a lot of these things already and I really want to explain them. But these are the common sightings in a game of League of Legends. So, starting with the first one here is tower dives. So, you're going to see this pretty often, maybe not so much in the early game anymore, but this is when two or more members of a team kill an enemy player under their tower. So towers are usually safe points. They need to be killed before you can kind of move forward. But sometimes, pro players have gotten very good at killing enemies underneath their towers. So just be ready for that. I don't think it's going to be, every game, but it will be in some games. You'll see a tower dive, and those can usually be pretty important moments in the early or mid game. The one I really want to talk about here is the team fight. This is where both teams fight with most or all of their members. So this is probably the most complicated, but also the most enjoyable part of watching a game of League. There's so much going on. All 5 people are using all their abilities. They're fighting. They're attacking each other. They're diving. They're jumping around. They're using their summoner spells. All these things all at once. So it's a bunch of chaos, and usually you don't need to understand every single step of a team fight. Although you can if you'd like to. There are videos out there about that. But you don't really need to understand every single step. You just need to understand the outcome. So you can see that when all 5 members of a team are moving up towards the enemy team, they're probably going to start a team fight. Either one side's going to start it or the other. And the really one thing that you have to really look for is who's alive at the end. So I talked earlier about an ace, which is where all 5 members of a team are taken out all at the same time. Um, so when that happens, the other team pretty clearly wins the team fight. It's usually whoever has more team members alive at the end of a team fight is usually the winner. So team fights are crazy. You'll learn a little more about them when you watch a game of League, but very exciting moments in a game. This is what I alluded to a little bit earlier, but vision control is when both teams get information by placing wards around the map. So I mentioned that supports are the most important part of getting vision for their team because they have the most wards available to them. They get wards automatically for being a support player, and all wards do is let you see parts of the map that you usually can't. So this isn't super relevant to just watching a game of League, but it can be a little bit interesting if you see the enemy, or not the enemy, if you see either support running around the map kind of aimlessly, if you're looking at the mini map, what they're probably doing is placing wards so they can get a little bit more information. So just a little bit of an explainer there. If you see the support kind of running somewhere without the rest of their team, they're probably just trying to get some wards down and get some information. So, the next thing is smite fights, which is kind of like a colloquial term that we use as a League community, but this is when both junglers try to take an objective at the same time with both of their smites. So this is when they both try to wait till it's about at, 1,000 health, whatever it is, 1,400 health, whatever it is. They try to wait till the objective is low and then use their smite at the right moment. And this is why it's so exciting, is because you have to do it exactly right. Otherwise, you're not going to get the objective. And if the other team gets the objective, it can be really, really bad, especially in the mid and late game. So this is when both junglers are trying to get to an objective as it's dying and try to secure it with their smite at the same time. So these are high stakes moments where you are like kind of waiting to see who gets it, where you don't really know who's going to win the smite fight until it's over. And last but not least, the teleport flanks. So this is where I talked to you about teleport earlier. And this is where the mid or the top laner teleport into a team fight. So say a team fight is about to start or is starting, and the top laner's on the other side of the map. They'll usually teleport in, but it's a teleport flank because they're teleporting in behind the enemy team. So the goal here is that they're pinching the enemy team from either side and essentially forcing a team fight on two different fronts. But yeah, you'll see that a lot where they'll be able to teleport behind an enemy and just get a pretty good flank. So these are some common sightings you'll see in the game. Hopefully they make a little bit of sense here. But yeah, that is essentially a rundown of a full game of League of Legends. Now you know a little bit about what's going on during each stage of a League of Legends game, starting with the draft, going all the way to the late game. So here's a little part that I wanted to insert kind of at the end here because it's relevant always throughout all parts of the game. But this is how to tell who's winning. So there's two things that I think you should really look for with how to tell who's winning, and that is the gold difference. So who has more gold in the game, which if you remember, from the slide where I showed you all the information at level 1, the gold difference was at the top of the slide usually, or on the top of the screen. They'll have who's winning and by how much. So you have to follow the gold difference. This is really the deciding factor with who's going to win the game, is how much gold that they have. So the other thing that you can try to essentially define who's winning by is the kills and deaths. So it's usually a pretty good measurement of who's winning. A winning team will have lots of kills and low deaths, whereas a losing team will have the opposite. So this one's pretty straightforward. It's usually also pretty interrelated with gold. Usually teams that are really ahead in gold will have lots of kills and not very many deaths. But either way, these are kind of the two things that you should look for to try and tell who's winning in a game of League, is gold difference and kills and deaths. So to go a little bit more in depth on each of these, gold difference goes on the gold total and then the gold diff per player. So essentially what this means is over here, you'll see what I'm talking about. So the gold total up here is 46,000 gold for the whole team that was playing on blue side this game. And then the gold difference is right here. It's 4.5 thousand. So the gold total and the gold difference are pretty clearly displayed right here. This means that this team is winning by a decent margin. You can also look over here at a gold difference per player. So we see over here, this is actually from an LEC stream, which they always show, which I really appreciate. But you can see that the left side top laner is ahead by about 900 gold, but their jungler is down by about 1.5 thousand gold. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell who's winning because the gold might be even, that might only be even because some players are winning and some players are losing in gold. So this can kind of be a good way to be like, ooh, well, this team's bot lane is winning, they're ahead in gold, but their mid and top lane are losing. So it's kind of maybe more even of a game than you thought it might be. And that's a little more complicated than you really have to get into. The main thing that you should look for is just the gold total. That's usually a pretty good way to tell if there's like who's winning at any point in time. Alongside the kills and deaths, it's pretty similar. You're looking at the total kills as well as the player kill to death ratio. These two things kind of add up to the kills and deaths, which you can see over here. Blue team has 16 kills and red team has 6 kills. So blue team is pretty definitively winning so far here. As well, you can look at each player, where you can see that the top laner has 0 kills and 3 deaths. That's what these first two numbers mean here. So they're not doing very well, but their jungler has 6 kills and 1 death, which means that they're doing pretty well. So if a team has a lot of players that have really good kill and death ratios, they're probably doing pretty well. They're probably winning the game. So the biggest takeaway from this, if how to tell who's winning at any point, is just look at the gold and look at the kills. It's pretty much as simple as that. So this one I wanted to throw alongside the how to tell who's winning, which is how to enjoy League of Legends. So I had a little section near the beginning of the video way back when, where it was, you might enjoy League if, and there was like a few things there. So these are kind of similar, but this is how to enjoy League overall. So that's why you might be interested in League, but this is why I think, or this is how I think you should go about trying to enjoy it. Um, I think that it can be a little difficult to enjoy if a game is slow or a game is boring, but these are always kind of really consistent ways for me to enjoy watching a game of League. You should really focus on the strategy. As I mentioned, especially in the mid and late game, there's a lot going on. Players all want to do different things. There's a lot of team play that you can focus on to try and make the game a little bit more entertaining and involved. You can also look for team fights. Team fights are usually the most exciting games or exciting parts of a game of League of Legends. For me specifically, I love to see team fights. I love to see players. Some players are so good at team fighting, and it's crazy to watch them play. Um, you can also root for comebacks and close games. I think close games are way, way more exciting than, stomps. So if you want to, kind of enjoy a game if it's getting boring, really start rooting for the underdog, honestly, especially if it's not, two teams that you have like a loyalty for, like one of them over the other. Just root for a close game. It's really nice sometimes to just relax, watch a close game, be like, whoa, they were losing, but then they got this objective and they're coming back and they have a chance. And that's always really fun for me to kind of root for the underdog as the game continues going on. You can also cheer for rare champions or rare gameplay. I think this one's a little more personal to me, but I love to see weird champions. I think picking champions that are not the ones we always see is always really exciting. Um, and as for gameplay, I like to see weird strategies. I like to see when you do things that aren't the norm. When you go and try to, say, make your top laner pick a champion that's not normal and then do something that's not normal to top lane. I think that's really cool. And I think it can really just shake it up. If you've watched, hundreds of games of League, I would really start cheering for players and teams that try to do things that are different. I think that's really cool. So hopefully these help just a little bit of how to enjoy League of Legends in general. I think all of these things make the game a lot more enjoyable for me. But of course, please let me know what you think below. What makes you actually like watching a game of League? And if you haven't watched one before, maybe tell me what you think you're going to like the most if you plan on it, because I also would love to know that. A little interjection here because I realized I forgot to film a transition between the last section you saw and the interview segment of this video. You can see I'm wearing a different shirt. This is the next day for me. but I'm very happy to have gotten an interview from CLOUDSIDKY. If you don't know him, he's an interviewer here on YouTube who does interviews with pro players, coaches, everything for LoL Esports. Super cool content creator. I really like the guy. I'm really glad I got an interview with him. And I just wanted to ask him what it means to be a new fan, what new fans should be excited for. Here's the interview I had with CLOUDSIDKY. All right, I'm very happy to be joined by CLOUDSIDKY for the interview portion of this video. So, Cloud, how's it going?
Not too bad. It's going well. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm really happy to talk to somebody who's been part of the space for a little longer than I have, especially for content creation. So my first question for you is, can you give us a little introduction to yourself and what you do for LoL Esports?
Yeah, so my name's Cloud Sidkey. I do interviews and a podcast that I run called the LCS Report. I talk about the LCS. I'm a big Shopify fan. I self-proclaimed number one Shopify fan. There are a couple other people that proclaim it, but I think I have them beat out. Um, So I'm a big Shopify fan. I do interviews with pro players. I post them on my YouTube channel, and then I also have like weekly videos that I post about the state of the league. One about Shopify, who would have guessed, and then one about Hama Life because I'm also a Hama Life fan.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think just based on content alone, you have those other people beat. So I'd say number one Shopify fan for sure. But awesome. You're very involved in the esports space. So my next question for you is what got you into LOL Esports?
Oh man, esports got me into esports. I watched, was it Worlds 2012
Oh wow, way
semifinals
back.
or quarterfinal? Yeah, that Worlds brought League of Legends professionally into my radar. I had been playing the game since the beta. My friend somehow got a copy of the beta, and we were
Oh wow.
playing. He invited me over to his place, and I started playing, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is so cool!" And then when it finally released, he said, "Hey, you don't have to keep coming to my house to play the game. You can actually just download it." I was like, "Really? I didn't know that." So I played almost every single season on and off, and then I started watching it a little bit here and there. The LCS became a thing in North NALCS became a thing in 2013. I watched a little bit of that. Um, but I never really I kept watching on and off until about 2015 where I was like, okay, it keeps I stopped playing the game, but I was watching a lot of it, and then it made me go back to the game. And I watched from 2015. I think I didn't miss a single LCS game since 2015, probably. I used to watch
Wow.
both NA and EU, so I watched both of those. I think once EU became like ever since 2022, I stopped really watching LEC. But yeah, I've been very I've been a fan of professional League of Legends for a long time now.
That's awesome. I'm a little newer. I think the first Worlds I watched was DRX versus T1 finals.
2022, yeah.
Yeah, 2022. So that was the one where I was like, I was really into it. I think I started watching LCS that year, and then I kind of just started following it ever since. But then I started playing in the tier three actually with Cloud in a league. And then I just kind of wanted to move in and start making some content about it too. So this video in particular is trying to get people to have a little bit of an introduction to LOL Esports and specifically how to watch it. So it's supposed to be for beginners. How do you go about watching a game? How do you find them? Like, how do you make sure you know what's going on? How to not get bored is one section I included because a lot of times it is pretty slow. Um, so my question for you is, if there is a new fan, like for all these new fans that should be coming to the space, what's one thing, like the most important thing that you think they should know about League Esports?
The most important thing they should know. Wow, that's a heavy question. Uh
Feel free to think.
yeah, the most important thing they should know is they should probably take their time picking a team to be a fan of.
Mm,
I think that's one thing where people often see something that really they enjoy. So I'll give an example of someone I know who's a Dignitas fan for a very long time now, and they kind of sort of regret being a Dignitas fan because they were a fan of that team because of something they had for a limited amount of time, And then
Mm,
they've been a Dignitas fan for years now, but they haven't had that for years, and they didn't realize it was like a temporary thing. So I'd say kind of take your time really watching and just enjoying the vibes and just learning about the teams before you make a dedication. The reason I say that is that's how I made my sports dedications, not really my esports, but at least for sports. Like I'm an Atlanta Falcon fan in the NFL, and it's just because they were the coolest bird, and there are a lot of bird teams in the NFL. I was like, I'm gonna pick the coolest bird. Falcons, yeah, those are cool, dude. Have you ever seen a falcon? So that I'm still traumatized by 28 and 3. So yeah, take your time with picking a team. Don't feel like there's any rush because in the league sometimes it's like, oh, you're a team of which fan? Just be like, oh, I don't know yet. That's totally
yeah.
cool.
I love that. That's great advice. I haven't really like chosen a team that I think I'm a fan of. I really like FlyQuest. I also really like Shopify, mostly because of you, to be honest. So props to you there. But yeah, I think that's some great advice. Really take your time picking, who your favorite team is, or even players, because players have ups and downs similar to teams as well. The only thing I know for sure right now is that I love North American esports, and I want us to do
Oh
well.
yeah.
So that's what I'm very excited for. But along the lines of new fans, my next question for you is there's a lot of struggles for new fans, whether it is like the complexity of the game, that League has this long history that a lot of people don't know or are intimidated by, or oftentimes the community being scary or kind of being intimidating to join. So what would you say about kind of like these issues if you had to like try and soothe the intimidation of joining esports? What would you say?
That's like the $1 million question. It's very difficult right now to separate, unfortunately, this is a worldwide trend. It's not just in League Esports, but like the negativity and toxicity that is going on.
Mhm.
And whenever you join the bigger subreddits or the bigger groups, it's always going to be there. If you're a beginner, and people will not have any grace towards you, which should be the opposite. And so I would recommend joining some of these smaller communities that are designated for beginners. I'll give a shout out to Brikachu. I think she does a phenomenal job at making like beginner type content that brings in people who just don't understand the game, don't know what's going on, or are like relatively new, don't know the history behind the league. She does a very good job at just like kind of explaining things, and it's understood in her community that not everyone's perfect. Not everyone knows what all the champions or all the teams or all the players are.
Mhm.
So that's one person. I think Mrs. Chim Chim does a pretty good job at that too. So those are two places that I would recommend kind of joining those communities. They're also quite close, which can be a turnoff to some people. You kind of just want to watch. You don't want to be part of it, but you don't have to. I think there's some efforts within content creators. Also, obviously with Bosskitty right now, hopefully we're building
Yeah.
an environment where beginners can kind of learn and not feel that weight of, well, I wasn't here for the past 16 years. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what this historic. I don't know who Bjergsen and Double Lift are. That's fine, and just have that type of discourse. So I'd say join these smaller communities. Uh, will definitely help you, and maybe avoid some of the bigger subreddits until you're fully capable of defending your own rights.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. I was fortunate enough to have older brothers that followed League Esports since, way back when. So I know who all those like famous players are, and I even saw them play like a little. But I know, someone joining the league in 2026 will have no clue. So actually, I want to make some videos about those players too, just like, beginner's introduction to all that history that I think is often kind of gate kept or even can just feel like too much for one person to learn if you're just trying to watch a video game. But yeah, I think that's also some great advice. Stick to the smaller communities, go with the people who say it's safe to be like a beginner player or beginner watcher. I really like that a lot. So I think my last question for you is what are you most excited about for League Esports this year?
Well, for League Esports this year, it has to be Worlds of North America. I mean, you said
Hmm.
it when we first started with the first question. You got into League Esports around the time Worlds was in North America. Like it's a
Yeah.
very special time. Every 4 years, we have a huge opportunity of having the World Championship, which brings millions of viewers. It brings tens of millions of fans. it sort of brings the community in a way that we don't get to see except once every 4 years in our neighborhoods. It's going to be in Texas. Finals is going to be in New York. I'll be there for both. I don't know to what capacity, but I'll definitely be there for both. And just building up to Worlds is something that I personally want to focus on this year. Of how are our teams looking? What are the expectations for Worlds? What are the fans doing for Worlds? And making this big event for Worlds in North America, it should it leaves the memory still leaves some shivers. Obviously, we had a great finals in DRX. We had like great
Mhm.
semifinals. We had great quarterfinals. We were very lucky with our most recent worlds, but I think every time we have an opportunity to have the world championship on our home ground, in our cities, it's something to be very excited for. The energy is just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. That was gonna be my answer too. It was, Worlds is here. It's on our doorstep. It's right here on our soil, and that's so exciting. I didn't even really understand the weight of it truly of 2022 Worlds until like the year after when I heard everyone like kind of reminiscing about it. But I'm so excited. I think I'm gonna make it to the New York finals this year for Worlds, and I'm very excited for that. It's an incredible opportunity to be a new fan and go if you want to. If you can afford to go to the Worlds. I know from my first live event being the LTA finals, where actually I got this t-shirt for the LTA North finals this last year. The live events are crazy. They're so much fun with all the different people and things to do, and just seeing the teams play their game, play their sport live is just truly a unique experience. It's really awesome. Um, and I think it's going to be in the same place that it was for the LTA finals for Worlds, if I'm not mistaken, in Allen, Texas. So that was a really cool arena. And then there's a lot of fun things to do around there. So lots of ways to get involved and stay entertained with the new events. But with that, I'm out of questions. So if there's anything else you want to shout out, feel free to do that now.
Yeah, if you're a new fan or just watching League Esports casually, you should become a Shopify fan. If you want to know why, you can hit up my channel, and you will not see me ever stop talking about Shopify. So
Yeah, definitely. You've definitely got me on the Shopify hype train more than once, so I can definitely attest to some quality content over there. But thank you so much, Cloud, for doing the interview. I think it's going to be really nice to kind of see more faces, not just mine, for the rest of the video, to see more people who love LOL esports as much as I do, to hopefully inspire some new people to check it out. So thank you very much.
well, thanks for having me.
And with that, I think I've covered everything I wanted to for a new summoner's guide to watching League of Legends Esports. So, again, please let me know if you have any questions down below. I hope you enjoyed the interview at the end here with CloudSidKY, just talking to another creator in the space. I hope that you got something out of this video, even if you're a longtime fan, even if you've never seen a game of League before. I really appreciate you watching, especially if you got this far. I think that this is a very long video, but I'm hoping that people appreciate the work that I put in here. I know that it wasn't perfect. I know that I probably didn't cover every single little thing, but I hope I made it a little easier if you are interested in League to go and be like, I'm going to pull up a live stream. I'm going to see what's going on. And hopefully you can like pick and choose. You can be like, oh, I remember this from the guide. I remember this part of the game. It's probably mid game now. It's probably late game now. That's really what I'm looking for here. I think this is a great place to start, to just start recognizing, each phase of the game, maybe some things about what you expect each role to do. And I think that's really valuable to just get you interested, get you started in the League of Legends watching space. So, of course, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, positive feedback, negative feedback, I'm happy to hear it below. And I will see you next time, hopefully with more content for some new fans. Bye.